Welcome to the Flute 360 podcast, where we incorporate a panoramic view of flute-related topics. I am your host, Heidi K. Begay, and this is episode 49, published Flutists with Dr. Terri Sánchez. The Straubinger Flute Company is a sought-out maker of fine flutes and pats. Located in Indianapolis, Indiana, the company celebrated their 50th anniversary in 2018. The Straubingers contribute to the community with new ideas, concepts, and raise the bar to new heights for all flutists. Straubinger flutes are known for their brilliant mechanism, beautiful tone colors, and outstanding craftsmanship. If you would like more information about Straubinger flutes, please visit their website at straubingerflutes.com. Welcome everyone to another Flute 360 podcast episode. Today we are talking with Dr. Terri Sánchez, who is the author of the books, The Aspiring Flutist Sound and Scale Book, and also The Aspiring Flutist's Practice Companion. Welcome, Terri, to the show.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, it's wonderful to be here. And like I was just saying earlier, this is a treat because you are the third person to do an interview in person. So I was able to talk with Mark Dooley and then Jake Fritkiss, and now I'm at the campus of your beautiful studio, and it's wonderful to do it in person.
It's so nice to have you here. Thanks for coming.
Yeah. So let's talk about your two wonderful books. Could you tell me and the listeners how the ideas of these books came about?
When I first started to teach at UTA, I was definitely intrigued and also challenged by the variety of levels that I encountered. And I saw very quickly in so many of the students a struggle that I had when I was in my undergrad, that Taffanel and Gaubert and scales and serious discipline practicing was not as appealing as it could or would be eventually. I think there was a really big misunderstanding that practicing has to feel like a grind, like something that you force yourself to do. And I really sympathized and empathized with them that, you know, when you have exercises, even etudes where they repeat over and over and over again the same pattern, like they're all 16th notes or they're all 8th notes, that sometimes if you don't know how to be engaged and present and caring about everything you're doing, that repetition can be an unfortunate trigger for boredom or stress, or you mistakenly think that you can kind of check out and be on autopilot, and then your insecurities start having their way with you. And I just saw all these practice struggles that I had experienced myself. And creating the exercises in the practice companion, they came one at a time, kind of based on different individual students. For instance, I had a grad student one time that, you know, we would get to these passages and I would say something like, oh, well, that's just chromatic. You can just play that more fluidly and enjoy the muscle memory. And she didn't have muscle memory with chromatic, you know, and she hadn't spent her years doing that muscle memory practice. So that's why I wrote Crazy Cool Chromatics. And it was so fun to hear her and also my other students just kind of rocking out to the exercise in the practice room. I would hear the sounds, you know, floating down the hallway. And after I wrote my first big exercise, the epic warm-up, and started writing individual exercises for the students, eventually there were enough for a book. And then the whole first half of the practice companion was a very fun process. I, over here on this wall, I put a poster board up and I hung a Sharpie and went about my teaching life. And then every time there would be one of those really nice moments in a lesson where you see that spark or an analogy really makes sense or something just connects, I would just say, hold that thought. I would go grab the Sharpie and write it on the poster board. And then that eventually turned into 3 poster boards filled with stuff. And then fast forward to a book eventually.
Oh, how neat.
Yeah.
That seems like a really neat process. And I love how if that moment, you know, presented itself, you said, okay, you know, like, this is great. And that light bulb moment, I love the ahas.
Yes.
Being a teacher, it's like, that works.
Yes.
And let me jot it down.
Yeah, that is kind of an obsession fascination with me, is what causes an aha moment, what helps us to hang on to them. Because that, I think, is one of the biggest challenges as a music major, is you have these inspiring moments in lessons and classes and master classes, and you might be inspired briefly for that moment. And if you're lucky, it lasts the rest of the day. And if you're even luckier, it affects your practice sessions for the next week. But how many of those are you trying to keep track of all at once? I'm very interested in how can we avoid busy brain, perfectionist, jumbled busy brain, where we're trying to just keep track of all the amazing things all the time and just keep it really simple and clear, and then have resources where those aha moments can be collected. That's just something that's so interesting to me, because I find that busy brain is one of the most common and I think most treacherous characteristics of musicians that just care so much and they want to be so quote unquote perfect, which we both know that's not a real thing.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So this book, honestly, it was for them and it was for me too. I was a terrible, terrible practicer. Just awful. Like every time I think about it, I want to go like write an apology note and give some chocolates or something to every teacher I've ever had. And I only really learned to love it after my musical studies, when I was on my own and spending the majority of my time teaching others. Then I saw how beautiful practicing actually is. And now it's like my favorite thing to do.
Yeah. I resonate with so much that you said in there. Yeah. And going back to that aha moment, something that I found, I had a huge aha moment in Greece when I studied with Dr. Navarre Galileus. And we were working on projection. And there was something that she said. She said, the sound is all around you. And it really resonated with me. And then she said, okay, come back tomorrow with that same so you can step into that. And I did. And I repeated it. And she goes, this is great. She said, what I'm concerned about is that you're going to go home to the States and you're going to lose that aha moment.
Yes.
And so she said something that will stay with me until the day I die. She said, you walk through that door. Find that space, this space right here where you were able to, project and be free in your musical expression. She said, you have to enter through that door and that doorway each time to arrive to that spot again. And so I'm such a visual person, like just noticing a door and saying, okay, I'm walking through that space. So I can...
I love that.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, it's really wonderful.
I wanted to share that because I know you're such a visual person.
I am. Yes, I'm so visual. We have that in common.
Your colors and everything on social media posts and things. I'm like, oh, she's a colorful person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when my students have an aha moment, actually this Tuesday, one of my students, Evelyn, had an aha moment with tone projection also. I said, okay, you're going to walk through that door every time now to get that sound. Because you're right, you can easily lose it. You're like, oh, that masterclass was when?
Yes.
That was a month ago. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm also a big believer in leaving clues or breadcrumbs because sometimes the door disappears.
Yes, it does. I like that.
I really often think of Lucy going through the wardrobe door to Narnia. And the first time she found her way in, it was so magical. And of course, she wanted to go back. And she was able to go back on her own. But then there were other times later when she wanted to bring other people, or even in the future where she couldn't go herself through that same door. The door changes and evolves and you find it in different ways. And so leaving clues, I think, is really, really important because it does flicker in and out of your awareness based on where you are.
I love that.
Yeah. And there's a project that's described in the Practice Companion. And I started doing this a long time ago. And I have to admit, some of my students embrace it. Some of them, I think they don't really get it. But the ones that really do it, it makes such a difference. I call it a sound sheet. I don't know if I ever had a chance to tell you about that or not. But in my master's, I had a wonderful professor, and she was really trying to help me have more depth and resonance in my sound, but my awareness was not what it is now, that's for sure. And I had kind of a rock bottom moment where I thought, wow, every single week I go into this lesson and she's having to tell me the same things and this is not working and I'm not sounding better. And I wanted to do something, anything to make progress, because I also hate the feeling of being stuck. And I don't ever want my students to feel stuck. I think that's something musicians just can't abide, is that feeling of not growing. So I sat down, and because I know I'm so visual, I put a blank sheet of paper in front of me. And I thought, okay, somehow on this sheet of paper, I'm going to solve this sound problem. And I didn't even really know what I was doing, but I thought, okay, if I had to describe what sound I wanted, what would I call it? And I realized that was probably one of my biggest blocks, is I didn't even know what I wanted. So how could I help to, myself to do what my teacher was asking me to do? And at the time, I definitely have a different concept of sound now, but at the time I came up with a sweet singing sound. So I put that at the top of the sheet of paper. Now what? Well, I'm so visual. How can I bring the visual into this? And I got excited. I went downstairs. This was at SMU during my master's. And I went to the computer lab, and I started looking on Google Images for pictures that had the colors and the emotions that I would want to embody in my dream sound, which I didn't even really understand what that was at the time, but I was just kind of following some clues, trying to get some little hints of the mystery, coming into focus. And then after I found this beautiful picture of a painting, this gorgeous blonde woman was draped in a cotton candy cloud, and there were pinks and blues, and it went with my sweet singing sound. I had made this document with the title, with the picture, and then I started collecting my aha moments so that they were all on one page. And I did this for 1.5 years, and I always had that sound sheet with me. I had it with me in the practice room. I had it in lessons. I had it in orchestra. And my funny story that I tell is that one day the oboist leaned over, Ian, and he said, "Terri, why do you have a picture of a naked lady on your stand?"
Oh, no.
Now, she was draped by the cotton candy clouds, but I had to explain, this is my sound sheet, this is my inspiration sheet. And just fast forward, when I was at UNT going for my next degree and playing in the orchestra, I got to play some beautiful solos. And it was staggering to me, the amount of people that came up to meet me and specifically compliment my tone. And that was such a big deal, because I had not gotten compliments on my tone before. I had not really known if this sound sheet thing was working, but it was sort of magical, and it really did work. And I have many sound sheets that I've used over the years. But what I love helping, or why I love helping students to make theirs and to use them, is because you don't have to keep track of it in your head. You don't have to have this door and that door and this door, or the magic door that has all the answers behind it. But you can just be yourself, just be in the flow, just be making music. And then if you have that moment where you don't love your sound, there's your beautiful, ever-evolving sound sheet right there for you to glance at and just be transported back to that memory of that day when that aha moment made so much sense, or that lesson when that teacher said that beautiful thing. And then if it's just collected all in one place, I find that to be so powerful, because how often do we actually read every page of our notebooks, you know? Yeah. So that's in the practice companion. And it's kind of at the heart of what I think works for practicing and growing as a musician, is collecting the aha moments, but knowing that they flicker in and out, they disappear, they change, they evolve. And you're always just kind of engaging with this very fluid, mysterious thing. But once you get the hang of the process actually being the good stuff, that's when you start sounding really good and feeling really confident.
Nice.
Yeah.
There's so many beautiful things you said in there. And I love how you are just a very flexible and open person to say things are changing. We're always evolving.
Always.
Always. And, this year I'm doing Invisalign. And I was terrified. Absolutely terrified, Terri. I thought, there's no way. And I have to do it for health reasons.
Were you worried about your flute playing?
Yes. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm not going to get my sound back. And it's actually put me in a really good place, because I have to get creative.
Yes.
I have to get very curious. I have to just experiment like crazy and do this with my lips or do this with my mouth. And what's this doing with my tongue with the plastic in there? And so it's actually giving me a toolbox that I didn't know I had.
Yeah.
And so I resonate with a lot of things that you said in there, because if you have, like you've done so beautifully, putting these little crumbs together for us and putting it in a nice, neat package, to be able to come to it whether you're in school or going through Invisalign.
Yes,
you know what I mean? So it's there and handy, ready to go.
It's so great the way you described that. If I could give one gift to every student of mine and just basically any music student that doesn't feel as empowered as they want to in the practice room, it would be what you were describing, substituting judgment for curiosity.
Mm. Yeah,
exactly. When you find the clues, follow the clues, enjoy the clues, curiouser and curiouser, that's always going to lead you to a more beautiful place in your practicing and your music making than saying, this is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong. This is what I'm supposed to be doing, but this is what I don't want to do, or whatever the contrast is that's causing you struggle. Yeah. Curiosity is always a better way to go.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, what if? What if I tried this? Yeah.
Because then you're just this, I mean, Lisa would say this a lot in yoga class. And she said, it's kind of like a little puppy dog. You know, it's nurturing that puppy dog and saying, come on, puppy, let's go and play. And then that tail wags and his ears perk up and he starts, panting and getting really excited.
Yes.
But if you say bad puppy dog, that's not the way it's supposed to go. Yeah. He shudders and gets really, small and goes into a corner and says, I don't want to play. And that's just that's who we are deep down,
I think so too. I had a partner lesson recently. I have already done this for years, encouraging my students to say clever little things when they make mistakes to avoid the instant judgment and, self-berating kind of behavior. But we came up with a new one recently and it was so much fun. Every time the student would make a mistake, she and her partner in the lesson, we would all three say, it's so nice to make mistakes. And we said that 37 times in 1 hour. Nice. And it became kind of funny and we got kind of addicted to saying it. But it really was a tangible difference that I saw in that student when the mistake was immediately followed by a, okay, now from this place, what are we learning? What are the clues that we're following now? Because without the mistakes, how are you going to know what to do next or what to even look for next?
Nice.
Yeah.
Speaking of published books, that reminds me of William Westney's book, where he said if you make a mistake, it's more like a, oh, look at that. How interesting.
Yes.
That's very curious. That's interesting. And I resonate with that too, just because of what you said.
I started doing that after I read The Art of Possibility by Benjamin and Rosamund Zander. Yes. He says to say, how fascinating.
How fascinating.
So actually you can see, I know we're doing a podcast, but you can see up there on the wall, there's a picture of my student with a shirt that says, we've got oof written on it.
Oh, yes.
So we talk as a studio. You're allowed to say, how fascinating. You're allowed to say jinkies, like on Scooby-Doo, like found a clue. Or oof, which is just kind of a funny, word. And then we've added now, it's so nice to make mistakes. Oh. And really all of those are viable alternatives to like cursing or like making, bad noises. But really, I think it's even nicer when you are not in reaction to mistakes, but they become more of a healthy part of the flow of your practice. I think maybe step one is learning that they're not the end of the world. And then step two is to kind of use them just in the flow of what you're already doing and not to be so in reaction to them.
Yeah. And I think that will help and transfer over beautifully to actual performances.
Oh, absolutely.
You're going to make a mistake. You're human, as much as you try to plan everything out and work out that weird section. If that mistake is going to happen in the performance, how are you going to keep, what's the solution? How are you going to kick back or,
in fact, I have a little formula that I follow hundreds of times per performance because I'm so not a perfect player. I'm a very flawed human being, as we all are. When I mess up, not if, but when, my little formula is, okay, crack or squeak or squawk or, whatever is not perfect the way I wanted it. That's just my clue to rebalance, refocus, or reconnect. And the very next moment, I'm going to play more beautifully than I ever have before. So what ends up happening is that the mistake itself is the impetus for something maybe that is greater than I've ever gotten to experience before in that moment of the music.
Oh, how neat.
Yeah.
Oh,
so by
cool.
pairing the two experiences, it really takes the sting out of it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So I could talk to you, Terri, about...
We could go on for a while.
I could go on forever. Oh, my goodness. I feel like I'm getting what I was saying before the interview, I love talking with people like you because it feels like I'm reading 10 books at once. I feel like I'm getting free lessons. I feel like these little gold nuggets will just stay with me forever. So I know I could pick your brain about like performances and stuff like that, but I would love to ask you more questions about your 2 books. So you were saying before our discussion that the processes for both books were completely different.
They really were.
Can you share that with the listeners?
So all of these nuggets, the little, whatever you want to call them, golden nuggets, little aha moments, things like that. I would be remiss if I didn't mention my husband and how profound of an effect that he's had on me. It's really a special thing to have gotten to basically study with him for, 15 years now.
Wow.
I always joke I should have a page turning section on my CV because I've learned more, page turning for him than I have in so many other situations. But he really has given me some insight into the world of a pianist and kind of the world of just incredibly meaningful practice that I didn't really have access to for many reasons during my schooling. I think one, just because flutists, we do tend to have a lot of other to-dos like tone and body mapping and just learning how to navigate the instrument itself. But when I would work with him and he would coach me, he would want a certain special something, and he doesn't know how to play the flute. He just knows that this is what it needs to be, and I would have to find a way. And so when we talked about practicing, we talked about performing, it was always completely separate from the idiosyncrasies of the flute. And so the things that I learned from him about practicing, they were just so powerful, and I got to use them in my teaching so often because I spent 3 years in between my undergrad and master's just teaching from morning till night, so many students. And so I got all these little, test cases and I came up with cute names. And so a lot of the practice games in the Practice Companion, they come actually from my husband and from his practicing world. And then they're sort of like through my self-help psychology cutesy flute teacher filter, and they have like different names, But, he really has had a profound effect on me. And when I started teaching at UTA and was able to put into practice these just universal, beautiful concepts, and I saw them helping students of every level in so many situations, I just knew I had to collect things all in one place. And if anything, for myself. Yeah. And so I was telling you, I put that poster board on the wall, and anytime we had an aha moment in the lesson, I had a Sharpie hung right next to it, and I would just say, hold that thought. And I would take 5 seconds and just go write little keywords down. And then ultimately I ended up with 3 giant poster boards filled of all these crazy little aha moment keyword things. And then organizing those started to turn into the book. I should also mention Simon Barry, who works at Carolyn Nussbaum Music Company. He was incredibly helpful because the book existed, and I brought it to him for him to read because Carolyn Nussbaum published the books, and he was really in charge of helping me with that. And it's funny. I remember it's very significant because he's younger than me, and I think it was one of the first times in my life I've had this really cool experience where somebody significantly younger than me was really schooling me on how to go about something. And he just really sparked some wonderful ideas about the structure and organization so that the book was in a format that other people could follow, because my brain is, it's like a crazy mind map in there. It's very swirly. And then, when you're coming from a position of being younger or not as much experience, or maybe if you're really in stress and struggle, that big, beautiful, fluid, swirly, collection of ideas maybe would be a bit overwhelming. So I really thank Simon for helping me to boil it down, make it simpler. He kept saying, shorter, Terri, shorter. So some of the little paragraphs that you see in there about practicing probably were 3-4 pages, So I'm very grateful to him.
Just condensing and getting to the point.
Yeah. So the exercises and the practice advice and the 100 practice games that are in chapter 8, I'm just super proud of having them all in one place. And I've gotten just an incredible privilege to talk to so many musicians, a lot of them non-flutists actually, even though, flutist is in the title, who have found a better way in the practice room because they were able to read through the chapters and really hook on to some ideas that freed them up from hangups that they had about practicing before. So that feels really incredible. I always think back to this particular moment. I think I was a freshman in college, and I was crying in the practice room, playing Enesco's Cantabile and Presto, those first 4 notes,
Right?
just going down to that low C, just over and over and over again. And I remember sort of seeing my own crying eyes in the mirror. And, just that to me is like the memory that captures how I felt about practicing, like wanting so badly to be making beautiful music, but not really knowing how, and also not wanting to spend that time by myself. And so to come full circle from that moment and such struggle to like loving practicing and like making it my main thing, it feels incredible. It feels really, really good.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wish I had that moment earlier on in my life. I feel like that moment where the ugly tears, the mirror, hating to be alone, because I'm very much of an extrovert. And I love being around people. I think that aha moment with practicing and falling in love with it happened during my DMA.
Wow. So recently. Oh my goodness.
Now it's like, oh, I love it. I mean, I would do it and I would show up and I would put in the time and I would be very intentional with my approach to working out a certain section or whatever it was. But it was this moment of, oh, I'm making music and I get to express myself. And I don't know if it was my analytical brain. And then later in life, and I had, I don't know, maybe I'm a slow learner or something, or maybe that light switch didn't come on soon enough or whatever. It came in my own time. But it was, oh, wow, I get to express myself through music. And it's not just all the right notes, all the right rhythms. It was very freeing and liberating. Yeah. So I owe a lot of that to Lisa because, as you know, she's a very colorful person.
Yeah.
So, but anyways, when you said the ugly tears in the mirror and the, oh, wait, I actually get to love this time with my flute and music. That was more of a recent thing for me, but...
Well, and I really can identify with you. One of my little pet projects that I do came about from stressful practicing in my DMA. So I had that moment my freshman year, but I kept having those moments all during undergrad, all during master's. I sort of had a respite when I took 3 years off and I was teaching because there's something about teacher brain that just works for me. It just puts me in a better place. Yeah. But by the time I was doing my DMA, I think that was like the worst practice room experiences. I got to this place where I almost couldn't take my flute out of its case. I was so tired and so burnout and just really, I was losing that spark. Yeah. So I figured out this trick where if I would just put my headphones in and just blast like Beyonce or Lady Gaga or like just like something with a strong beat and something that didn't feel anything like Gaubert. Yeah. And if I would start to practice and warm up and improvise with pop tunes, I would get my mojo going and I would remember, oh yeah, I love music, and the momentum would be flowing. And then I would be able to segue from that into really productive practicing. So I don't know if you have ever seen them, but I'm going to start sharing them on a more regular basis. I have these pop music descants. Like I have these long tones you can play along with Adele and Pharrell. And I'm trying to...
I remember you mentioning it on one of your social media posts.
Yes. Yeah. So I have a few of them that I've done, and I'm going to start doing them for different instrumentalists. I've seen a lot of aha moments come from those because it's so funny. We're playing Mozart or Bach and we forget that sense of pulse is the same as when you're blasting your favorite radio station driving down the road. Right. That the beat is the same, rhythm is the same, music is the same, no matter how many hundreds of years apart, they were, the songs or pieces were written. And of course the style is different and the classical music that we practice is much more of a delayed gratification kind of project. Pop music is more instant and you can connect right away. But so many of the universal musical skills that we all need are the same. And so I want to do more and more of that and share more and more of that because I think that students who love music and they're young and they're figuring out what is practicing, they can really benefit from using music that they already understand as a transitional tool into this high art music that they're learning about.
Yeah, you could, and I'm mentioning this because it could maybe help your project. Dr. David Forrest is a music theory professor at Texas Tech, and he started this semester a curriculum where he's introducing students to theory through the pieces they already know.
I love that.
Isn't that great?
That's fantastic.
Yeah. The thesis of it and the idea behind it is they hear this music on the radio, they're singing in the shower, they're getting ready.
There's a connection
all
there.
the time.
Yeah.
And then, then they go into these classrooms and, it's stingy Mozart and we have to
be extra serious. Uptight.
Yeah. But if he can show look at this harmonic progression here in your favorite Selena Gomez piece and, look, it's very similar to this, classic piece. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'll have to shoot you his email or something.
That'd be so nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just for maybe to help the project, but
sure.
But anyways, so is there a portion of either book, you were mentioning your epic warm-up. Could you give us some highlights of either book that's your favorite?
Yes. Yeah. Actually, I can briefly mention something from each. From the Practice Companion, the epic warm-up is the first exercise. And I really get a kick out of that because it brought together a couple of very meaningful things for me. One, Kim Clark, who runs Floot Fire, really great music camp. She had asked me to do this simple scale exercise for the Floot Fire book. And at that time, believe it or not, even though I was an educated musician, I just did not have a comfort level with Finale or Sibelius or notation software. And so I procrastinated and I just kept dragging my feet. And eventually I was like, oh, Kim, can you get somebody else to do this? And I ended up feeling so bad that that next summer I sat down and I said, this is ridiculous. I have got to get comfortable with this, medium for writing down music. And I thought, okay, what am I going to write? What am I going to write? And then the idea for taking the really awesome gems from Helen Blackburn's Super-Duper Zen Yoga Warm-Up packet, where she's collected all these incredible exercises. I had noticed I was giving this packet out to my students and I loved it so much myself. And I thought it was kind of like the be all end all of this is how you warm up. But they would only do 1 or 2 and they wouldn't do all 8 that were in the packet at that time. And so I sat down, I was like, I'm going to learn Finale and I'm going to make a warm up that just has all the good stuff in it and that you just have to keep going. And then also I, was thinking to myself, and it's not going to be boring. It's not going to be repetitive to the point where you can accidentally go into autopilot. And so then the epic warm-up happened and I still use it to this day. It's like my main warm-up. And I have posted a version of it online for free and there's an updated version in the book. But it's so fun to me because I just get to talk to all different types of people who use this warm-up. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's somebody in France doing my epic warm-up this morning. Or, it's just crazy, how fun it is to have that out there. Yeah. So that's one of my favorite things from the Practice Companion. And then what I love about the Sound and Scale book, besides just the main idea, which is 1, not to be scared of scales, and 2, to use scales as an exercise to explore sound and to become a better flutist through scale practice. I really love the 3 exercises, the luxurious long tones, which I kind of say tongue in cheek because they're only 3 minutes long. And then the major triplet exercise and then the 1 octave major minor exercise, they all have piano accompaniments. And I do want to say that they are easy. They are so easy to play. I am not a pianist. If I even act like one, it's just a very bad pianist. But these accompaniments are like 1, 4, 5, 1 type patterns. And so I'm hoping that over time, more and more flute teachers can do what I've been doing, which is coach their students from the piano. So that way in every lesson, there's this bonding of, listening to the flute and piano sound as a blend, which I think sometimes only happens once or twice a semester. Yeah. And then it's so foreign that it's got a stress element to it. Yes. But because my students are playing with piano with me every single week, week in, week out, the intonation is much better. They're much more connected to the different key signatures. And then I find that it's a smoother transition when they do their piano rehearsals. So I'm hoping a lot of people can benefit from those accompaniment parts.
Yeah. And I can relate to that. I mean, how often do we have recitals?
Yes.
And then it's like we have 1 or 2 rehearsals with that pianist and then go. But if you can kind of be around the instrument and plug in, I think that's really beneficial.
Yeah. And right now I have a little pet project, practicejunkie.com. It's just in its baby stages. But if you go to practicejunkie.com the-aspiring-flutist. You can find some MP3s of the accompaniment. So if students want to practice along just with their headphones, the MP3s are okay. They're MIDI files. I'm hoping to get into the studio and get higher quality pianos soon, but those are available if people don't have a flute teacher there to play piano for them.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks for mentioning that.
Sure.
And for the listeners, I'll put the links in the show notes so that way it's easy for them to access.
Yeah.
So to kind of wrap up today's discussion, is there any advice or tips that you would like to give the aspiring flutist who wants to publish their writings?
Oh, sure. Yeah, as we were talking about before the interview, the process was really different for both books. But what they both had in common was just me wanting to collect the stuff that was meaningful to me. So I would say absolutely number one is the collection process, however you do it, in a notebook, in a poster on the wall, voice recording, maybe just on your phone, ideas. Actually, that's something I do a lot is I might be driving and like, oh, what if I did this? And then I just, press record on my phone so that I don't lose it. But if you collect the things that are meaningful to you, and then after you have enough of a collection to look at it and put it into a format that makes enough sense that somebody who was not already familiar with your ideas or your philosophy could follow it. That's my thank you to Simon for that collection, then a format that makes sense. And then keep interacting with the project because it's just like the sound sheet I mentioned earlier. It's such a living thing. So when you write an exercise and then you print it out and then you play it and then you try it with students, it's a different thing after you have some experience with it. So then you go back and you rinse and you repeat and just keep letting your project evolve and be fluid and get newly excited about it in different ways as you keep engaging with it rather than thinking, oh, it has to be this one way or I have to make it in this way that would be acceptable to others. I found that whenever I was blocked, that was usually at the source of the block. It's like, oh, well, this has already been written, or, oh, this person wouldn't like it. Or I would find those little voices in my head. And then when I let that go and I just thought, you know what? I like this and it works for me and it works for my students, might as well share. That's when things really would flow.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of parallels between what you just said and my talk with Mark Sparks.
Oh, really?
He said when he was writing his orchestral excerpt books, he said there are a lot of things in there that people won't understand. They don't get. And he said the same thing. As I was writing these down, he said, I just heard people saying, what are you doing? What is this? And he kind of told these voices, well, you know what? It works for me and I literally am benefiting from it. So I want to share it. Yeah. And so if you don't get it right now in this stage of wherever you are, that's fine. But I have to put it out there for me and I have to put it out there for my students because I believe in them.
Yes.
And so I think that's really interesting. And I love it when interviews and these little nuggets come up and they're cross-referencing and there's parallels. Yeah. Because it's like, whoa,
Well, we're really talking about the creative process. And ultimately, whether you're publishing a book or writing an article or writing exercises, it's the creative process, just like practicing is the creative process. In fact, this is something I picked up from my husband. When we play a beautiful piece of music or we practice a beautiful piece of music, we're co-creating with the composer because they left us their blueprint for the best version of what they were hearing or imagining. And then without us breathing new life into it and co-creating with them, it's not a real thing out in the world. So I think the creative process is incredibly applicable, not just for flutists who are making things and putting it out there, but just anybody going into the practice room.
Yeah, definitely. And, my trip to Greece this past summer really brought to light this whole creative process because you see these archaeological finds, vases and pottery and whatnot and jewelry. And the thing that really resonated with me is these people from thousands of years ago needed to create something. Yes. And they wanted to pass it down, and I don't think they thought, oh, it's going to pass down for thousands of years and it's going to be preserved that way. But what I learned from that trip was they needed to create something. It wasn't just survival, collecting berries and hunting. It was, I want to express myself in my art and things like that. So I don't know, just a lot of the things you just said kind of brought me back to that trip from Greece.
Yeah.
And just thought to share because just that creative process, you know,
Yeah.
and we're humans and it's in us.
I had just some really meaningful moments, both with my own students and also with students that come just for like a one-time lesson as they're getting ready for different things. When we talk about valuing creativity and valuing spontaneity and basically valuing their own ideas. And I think, you know, whether it's practicing, performing, writing, whatever it is, I think that's at the heart of creating, is knowing that what you like, what you love, it has meaning just because you like it and you love it. And the odds are that so many other people in the world would benefit from it. So you just got to put it out there and let it be what it's going to be, because it'll probably take on a life of its own that you can't even predict at this point.
Yeah. Own your own stuff.
Yeah.
Very neat. Oh, thank you for all of that.
Sure.
Yeah, beautiful. So in the very last segment of the show, I do with my guests a portion called Picks. So any picks that you have for the listeners today would be appreciated.
Sure. Well, you had mentioned this, and immediately I was thinking of a couple of books that basically changed the trajectory of my thinking when it came to teaching and then ultimately writing these books. The first one is The Art of Possibility by Benjamin and Rosamund Zander. Just such an incredible book. I could go on for a while, but trust me, you got to read this book. And then after I read it, it really kind of softened me and opened me up to more creative thinking. And from that place, I was finally brave enough. I had been wanting to do it for years, but I was finally brave enough to buy a copy of Julia Cameron's The Artist Way. And after going through her 12-week creative unblocking course, it's like she created a monster. I know you can see, you know, as you look around the studio, that just everywhere I have things that I love to look at. And after I read that book, I went through a painting phase, and then the writing kind of came from that. And I cannot recommend both of those books highly enough, especially The Artist's Way for musicians that feel that they have so much more to offer than they're currently offering. If they feel that they have this spirit inside of them that is blocked for whatever reason, her book takes you pretty systematically through an unblocking process. It's pretty incredible.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I did read the Zanders book. It is phenomenal.
It's amazing.
Yeah. It's really great. And I cannot wait to check out that other book.
Yes.
That's
I've actually led a student book study with it, and I'm constantly recommending it to my students, and I've seen it make a real impact.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, I will say, because I don't know if you know this, but Haley was one of my students before she went to Christine, before she went to you.
Yeah.
And I just know through the grapevine, that's my connection to your studio. Your students adore you. They love you so much.
Nice.
Yeah. And
That's
just
so nice.
And just knowing you as a friend and seeing you at different flute events and stuff, like, you're just so illuminating and inspirational. And I know your friends in the flute community are just so appreciative of having you being this beautiful performer and teacher. And so I want to thank you for that.
I really appreciate that. You know, I think we need to say more kind things to each other. You know, I mean, when I saw your podcast and you started advertising that, I was thinking, yes, this is so awesome. Whenever somebody puts something creative out there, it makes everybody else feel a little bit more empowered too. So I really thank you for doing this podcast.
Oh, thank you, Terri.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before I forget, my pick is the Tea House in Santa Fe, New Mexico. It's this little cute shop off of this canyon road where there's a lot of art galleries, and it's super cute. And so if anyone is in the area, Santa Fe is a beautiful city to visit. And my favorite tea there is the strawberry mango tea.
Oh, yum.
Yeah. Speaking about colorful things, you know, strawberry mango is very colorful. So thank you again for everything.
Sure.
And I can't wait to talk to your class.
Yeah, this will be fun.
Yeah. Today's episode is sponsored by J&K Productions. They produce all of my episodes, from adding the intro and outro music to editing the audio and all post-production needs. Contact them for your next podcast project at jkproductions.media. Thank you for listening to the Flute 360 podcast. For more information, please visit HeidiKBegay.com. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please rate and review in the iTunes store. Let's talk about flute.